Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Café podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our microniche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Café, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode. Hey, I'm Dr. Eve Harrison, and I am super excited to welcome you to the first episode of the House Call Vet Café podcast. At the House Call Vet Café, we know the amazing impact that our community can have not only on each other, but on our patients, on our clients, and the industry at large when we come together. And I think we all know that our industry needs to be lifted up and revamped a bit itself, right? So here's where I think our mobile vet community can kind of be a beacon of light and maybe even become a source of inspiration to help lift our colleagues in other aspects of the veterinary industry. So this podcast is for and by house call veterinarians to give our community a platform to share our stories, to lift each other up, to support each other, and also to share actionable, practical tips and resources as well. So I'm so excited to share with you a little about myself and some examples of the amazing content that we'll be sharing together here in this podcast. So let's dive in. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Eve Harrison, and I've been a house call vet since 2016. So the way I started is probably similar to the way a lot of you guys started. And I want to share my story with you because maybe some of you can relate to some of it. And, there are also aspects of my story that people ask about a lot, which are a little bit on the non-traditional path. And so I wanted to share this kind of windy path with you guys too. So I'm a UPenn grad. I honestly started burning out during vet school, and I had a lot of anger, honestly, about various aspects of my own and my friends' experience in school, how we were taught to value ourselves or not, taught to respect our own personal learning curves, how we were taught or not taught the very real emotional and psychological aspects of becoming a doctor and taking on that kind of responsibility. I was angry at how my friends and I were treated during rotations. I was angry that interns and residents were visibly being treated like crap and, how that seemed to kind of roll downhill and fall squarely on the students. I was pissed off that we were, left veterinary school already feeling scared and bad about ourselves. And to be honest, I actually considered quitting vet school in my second year. But I spent a summer in a tropical South Pacific island, which definitely soothed my soul, doing volunteer work at a place called the Esther Honey Foundation for Animals with some amazing vets and vet students from around the world, some of which who are still my best friends to this day. And after that, my passion was completely renewed. So we did a ton of surgery there, which I really enjoyed. And I knew it was going to be really important to me to continue to get really good at surgery and to elaborate on those skills for the rest of my education. So I did a general rotating internship in surgery, medicine, ER, cardiology, and exotics, where my faith in the veterinary industry was again kind of restored, and where I had these incredible mentors and intern mates that made me feel like I was on the right path, and that a path as a surgeon might really be the right one for me. And some of those people are still some of my best friends to this day. So I applied to a surgical residency, and by some crazy strike of like fate or whatever, I managed to match at a surgical residency program on my first application without having done a surgical internship. So I seriously did not expect that to happen, since I'd been told over and over and over again that no one gets a surgical residency on their first application. So when I matched, I actually had very, very mixed emotions. I was flattered, I was honored, happy, excited, I was proud, really proud. And also on some level, I was really confused and terrified. And when I started the residency, I ended up feeling some of the most intense imposter syndrome I've ever felt in my life. I felt deeply that I did not belong there, that I didn't deserve to be there, and that none of it was real. So, I've never been the surgeon type, as they say. I don't really identify as being like arrogant or pushy or fast or abrupt. Like I'm not super indecisive as a rule, but I'm certainly not like excessively decisive either. And for anyone that knows me, I'm very strongly empathetic. I feel a lot for others. And, if I've fucked something up, I generally tend to own up to it and I apologize. So, when I'm unsure, I'm not too proud to ask for help. Like that's kind of my MO like that. So these are all qualities that people usually don't associate with surgeons. So I was fully aware of that. And I had also gotten a lot of encouragement from different colleagues and mentors who, did encourage me to still go for it, saying that these exact qualities were what could actually make me an exceptional surgeon. And I felt that could be true as well. So my plan was to do surgery anyway, to kind of lean into my fears and to be a different kind of surgeon. And I wanted to embody that you could be a badass surgeon and still apologize when you're wrong. You could be a badass surgeon and still ask for help. You could still be really empathetic and kind and care very much about your clients and patients and be a surgeon. So while I wanted that to be the outcome for me, I was also kind of fighting my own self about whether I was jumping into a world that was actually good for me to be immersed in. So, when I started my surgical residency, I also had, pretty severe cultural shock. So coming from my warm, cozy internship, where it was so clear that most of the folks there really cared about me as a human being and about my journey and my career, there was emotional support, there was cultural diversity, which is really important to me personally in the vet space. And there was a genuine sense of friendship and camaraderie there from the mentors and my intern mates. So most of the time in my internship, I felt that I was in a place where I was safe to learn and to explore this sort of weight of my new responsibilities as a doctor. So that being said, was it one of the hardest and most challenging things I've ever done at the time? Yeah, it was that too. But it also felt very supported. And when I finished that internship, I actually felt good about myself. In surgical residency, I felt instantly bad about myself and kind of like embarrassed and ashamed most of the time. So the vibe was completely different. It was clear that this was not a safe place for me to learn in the way I needed to learn. It was a place where you'd publicly get put on the spot to be made an example of, or to point out publicly how bad your decisions may have been as a doctor, even if, it was a subjective matter of doctoring style or of opinion. And, if you ask me, it was like Monday morning quarterback land, if you know what I mean by that. So everyone had an opinion and it was very rarely support. And I, have to also say that I saw multiple episodes of severe and overt racism and sexual harassment issues that occurred at that hospital. So some of those events were finally acted on several years after other folks and I reported them. And I would say in retrospect, I believe action was probably only taken years after I left due to the Me Too movement, as well as these serious issues in our industry kind of coming to a little bit more of center stage. So all of that being said, there are a few mentors from my residency that I absolutely adore with my whole heart, and I feel incredibly grateful for their support, that they provided for me when I was going through all of that, and who I do still keep in touch with to this day, but they were the exceptions. So anyway, it's probably not shocking that I ended up severely clinically depressed and gained 30 pounds. And I ended up in therapy, which I'd done many times before, but also I ended up on multiple meds, which was the first time in my life that I'd ever had to do that. So I think my meds may have really saved my life, but they weren't enough to save my residency. And eventually the whole endeavor fell apart. And I finally came to terms with the fact that I truly did not and never would belong in that place. So at the time, things felt like an utter disaster in my life. And I was beyond ashamed. I was humiliated to leave my residency and for those mentors to have seen me at such a low in my life. And I felt like, honestly, that I was an embarrassment, a joke of a veterinarian. And I suffered with those feelings for many, many years. So after that, I did a ton of relief work. I did overnight ER work. I did a lot of mobile ER surgeries at different clinics since I had those skills, but I felt like I was floating. I literally never in my career ended up accepting a full-time job anywhere, ever, because none of it felt right. And I felt like I just could not find my place in veterinary medicine. So at this point, I was only about 5 years into my career, and I was feeling acutely aware of how much I'd sacrificed and how much more it would cost me. And honestly, I didn't like any of it. And it was kind of at this point that I considered leaving the industry completely. So at that point, I decided to partially put my career on hold and become a yoga teacher instead. So the goal for me was to teach, of course, but also to kind of heal my own mind and also my body, which was now holding a lot more weight than ever before. And also, holding on to a lot of chronic pain that I was having at the time. And I imagine there were a lot of factors to that, but probably a big one was the stress of not living my life in any sort of alignment with my beliefs or my true self, or honestly, kind of the types of people that I wanted to be surrounded by. So I became a yoga teacher and I taught for several years alongside really, really light part-time relief work. And, at this time I'd made a decision to live really, really humbly and to have a lifestyle with only kind of the bare essentials so I wouldn't have to do any more vet work than I could handle. So somewhere along that path, my dear, dear friend, Dr. Marcia Medrano, asked me to do some relief work for her house call practice in San Francisco. So that first house call I did for her practice, I knew I'd found my path and I needed to become a house call vet too. So I bumbled around for a while, year or two, and eventually I started my own mobile practice. But the story didn't end there. I know my career has been such a disaster, but I'm sharing it with you so that you know it's really possible to come out on the other side. And also that, so that if you've also clawed tooth and nail to get where you are now as well, that you're not alone. So I actually spent many years in my own practice feeling lost and burnt out, not just as a vet, but as a business owner as well. So there were points in time when I was seeing way too many clients and had a majority of them, walking all over me with zero regard for my boundaries. And to be honest, I may not have even had boundaries, and I certainly wasn't communicating them well. There were times I was scared I wouldn't have enough work to pay my bills. And there were times that I was completely overwhelmed with clients and sick patients, and I still struggled to pay those bills. So even in my own practice, I found myself pretty much right back where I was. So i.e. with no time for my health or the people and things that are so dear to me, like my yoga or like my music or my partner at that time. So it wasn't until I made major investments in myself, including regular therapy, leaning into my own yoga practice, leaning into yoga philosophy in general, prioritizing my music as therapy and self-care. And it wasn't until I invested in business training. So I invested in 5 different online courses. I invested in spiritual and professional one-on-one coaching, which is very expensive, but a damn good investment. I did personal development workshops. My dear friend, Dr. Mariam Kamal, introduced me to Tony Robbins and brought me to one of his weekend workshops with her, where I learned a ton, and have since been pretty much addicted to personal development, everything. And, after all of that and many years, my practice finally was able to become this sustainable and profitable practice that I'd always wanted it to be. And it was all done my way, on my terms. So I guess there's still a little bit of surgeon in me, right? My career has to be on my terms now, my way or the highway. And that's a pretty surgeon thing to say, isn't it? But, it is what it is. And the thing is, I finally know how to do that, how to create my own practice on my terms. So after all of that work on myself and my practice and a lot of financial investment, honestly, I was able to finally start to practice from a place of emotional health and well-being myself. So it wasn't just about me. It wasn't, it was that I wasn't constantly aggravated at my clients and feeling they were draining me to the point of madness. I was able to provide more for my clients and my patients. And I finally reached a point where I could give generously without resentment. And I could really be able to give my patients the level of care they deserved and have that come from the right place within myself. So when I finally realized that I had this amazing practice and I was finally happy as a vet and my business was doing really well too financially, I realized I had something that was really worth sharing with other folks. So I decided to create this online CE course, which is RACE approved, the House Call Vet Academy, so that other vets don't have to go through all of the years I went through trying to find a way to do this. So vet school didn't teach us any of this, right? Everything I know is because I learned it the hard way or because I made a decision to invest in training and mentorship for myself outside of the traditional way that we get educated as veterinarians. So I figured all of the mistakes I made and everything I learned the hard way, why should other folks have to reinvent the wheel and figure out from scratch how to apply some of this outside the box thinking to their house call practices? There's so much wisdom outside of our industry that we can apply to our practices. And I wanted to kind of help integrate some of that knowledge into our space through the House Call Vet Academy and also through this podcast. So before we jump into more information about what you can expect for the future in this podcast, I wanted to share a couple other tidbits about me that are totally outside of my life as a vet. So to round it out, I play the flute semi-professionally when I'm not doing vet stuff. I play weddings occasionally, and I also play in a few orchestras, including the National Virtual Medical Orchestra and the Los Angeles Doctor Symphony Orchestra. So I'm super grateful that these organizations accept me as a veterinarian, as a doctor, to be a part of the medical community, since we aren't always appreciated as true doctors in some company, right? So I'm really proud and honored to be a part of those communities and thankful. Aside from that, I play in a bunch of different folk and traditional music bands around Los Angeles, and also weddings. I think I mentioned that. So my house call practice is named after my cat Marigold, who passed away at the age of 20, but I now have a kitty named Maggie. And I'm a plant-based eater. I've always been super intrigued by mushrooms, just as like these strange organisms that they are, and also from a therapeutic perspective. So I've also gotten a little bit into foraging when I'm hiking too. And since this is a cafe, I should tell you what my favorite beverages are. So for coffee, I love the mushroom coffee from Four Sigmatic. From Starbucks, I love the London Fog. And in terms of herbal tea, I have 4 favorites that I wanted to share with you guys. So those are organic reishi mushroom with rooibos and orange from Traditional Medicinals, Cup of Sunshine from Traditional Medicinals as well, Divine Immune blend from Buddha Teas, which is so delicious. I just cannot get enough of that stuff. And Tulsi Sweet Rose from Organic India. And also mushroom matcha green tea from Four Sigmatic. So now that you know who's on the other end of your AirPods, I want to share with you what you can expect from this podcast. So episodes will come out anywhere between 1 and 5 times per month, and they will tend to be 30 to 60 minutes long. We'll be highlighting house call veterinarians in our community who are doing awesome stuff, unique and innovative things, and generally we'll be building the voice of our tiny but rapidly growing community. And in addition to hearing personal stories from inside our own community, we'll be talking about some of the most commonly sought after subjects within this podcast. And that information will be coming to you not only from me, but from all of you guys and other experts in our community. So some of those subjects will include, how do I get my ducks in a row when starting as a mobile vet? What are some liabilities I need to be aware of as a mobile vet? What kinds of insurance do I need? How do I know if I need an attorney, and if so, what kind? Practical tips and guidance on IHE protocols and end-of-life care. We'll be talking about tackling bookkeeping for house call vets. We'll be talking about tips and tricks on solo animal handling, when and how to hire a tech or virtual assistant. We'll be talking about how to avoid taking on problem clients and how do we screen for them. When and how should we let go of problematic clients from our practices, i.e. how do we fire the wrong client, who's just not a good match for us. We'll be talking about retirement for mobile vets, what to do if a corporate mobile practice comes to your town. This is a very common question. How to get more patients into your practice, and what to do when you're overwhelmed with client emails, texts, and requests. So we'll be delving into a lot of material like that, and just kind of getting to know the members of our community. So if you are a mobile vet or prospective mobile vet looking for support, inspiration, and community, then this podcast is for you. If you identify with any of what we just talked about today, hit the button to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and join us in our free Facebook community by searching House Call Vet Café or by clicking the link in this episode description. I hope to see you inside. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Café. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for house call vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Café.